Namaste. I welcome you all on my channel and hope that you will like the content. If you find it useful, do like, comment, and share the videos in your circle. In this video, I am going to share some insights from the voyage of Vasco da Gama to India. So, without waiting anymore, let's go back in the history, have a look at the voyage of Vasco da Gama. To have some structure, the post is divided into 4 points as you can see. Before jumping onto the voyage, we will have a look at the reasons for the voyage. After that, what went on as a part of the preparation. Next is going through the events of the voyage. And finally, we will see some happenings at the arrival in India and subsequent events. We have to understand that Vasco da Gama or his adventure to India didn't happen in isolation. It was not like someone, a brave sailor, who stepped out of the door, spread the sails of his ship, rode on the mighty waves and dark world of the ocean to ink his name in the history. It was not in isolation, but a result of sequence of well-planned events and decisions. First and the foremost reason for such a desperate attempt was the fall of the Byzantine Empire to the Ottoman Empire in 1453. Byzantine Empire, also called the Eastern Roman Empire, was one of the last remnants of the Holy Roman Empire, which sprung up more than 1800 years ago from today. With the Caesar to Ottoman Caliphate Empire, the land route from Europe to Asia was completely shut off. All direct trade related activities ceased from both the sides. If it has to happen in any case, it would be through the Turks and Arabs, which was, of course, not at all profitable and in many cases not possible. Land route was closed. What to do now? Well, there must be sea route and an air route. 16th century, no planes, so waters is the only option left. But who knew the routes? Nobody in the Europe at least. Even the world map with them was of Ptolemy, and Ptolemy lived in 1st century AD, 1400 years ago, before the Vasco da Gama. Why should we be so desperate to have trade with the Indians when we have so many glorious European nations to trade? But if we do so, what will happen to the lords of the land of the riches and magnificent elephants draped in gold? What will happen to the large black pepper and other exotic spices, finest silk and cotton? And what will happen to the legend of Prester John? They must have said, no, we have to do it. If the Portuguese didn't do it, some of the neighbors will do it. Now, what with these blocks of papal bull in John 2, these are at the very root of the exploration stuff, and we will come to them later on in the video. Just make a note of this date 1452, 1455, then 1493 and 94. They are important. First date from the previous slide 1452. Dum diverses, whatever they say, I'm not sure correct pronunciation for this, is a papal bull, kind of charter from the Pope, issued in 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. This is the effect of fall of Byzantine Empire to Ottoman, and it was issued to Portugal King Afonso V. 3 years later, same Pope Nicholas V issues another bull, Romanus Pontifex. It was a follow-up of Dum Diverses. It gave the Portugals exclusive rights of ownership of land along the West Africa. Also, it forbids other Christian nations from infringing the King of Portugal's rights of trade and colonization in these regions. 37 years later, Pope Alexander VI issued a bull Inter Cetera or Cetera. Again, I'm not sure what is the correct pronunciation. It gave exclusive rights to Spain of the lands discovered by Columbus in 1493. So the earlier rights were the exclusive rights to the King of Portugal. In 1493, the rights were given to the King of Spain to the lands which was discovered by Columbus in 1493. Also, all others were forbidden to approach the lands west of the line without special license from the rulers of Spain. The bull also stated that any land not inhabited by the Christians were available to be discovered, claimed and exploited by Christian rulers. Also, Catholic faith and Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that of the health of souls be cared for, and that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. Now, these three papal bulls are collectively referred to as the doctrine of discovery. That is, Christian kings can claim new lands discovered unclaimed by any other Christian king before, and that they possess exclusive rights to subdue the population and natural resources. This treaty was a result of fight between King of Portugal and Spain over the rights of new worlds. They went to Pope who got the world divided for them to carry out explorations and subjugations. You can see two lines in the map. Line closer to the Africa was drawn in 1493, which was later shifted to west a bit in 1494 so as to give little maneuverability to Portuguese ships to steer east. This turned out to be excellent in 1500 for the Portuguese. We will come to this. Done with the papal bulls, let's move to the other factor of the voyages, the perfect king, John II. John II was no just another king of Portugal. He was determined to stick with the bulls discussed earlier. He wasn't afraid to critique the demarcation done of the world by Pope, which seemed to him favorable to Spain and against Portugal. As a result, the line was shifted to the west later on, just as we saw in the previous slide. John too resumed exploration to India to benefit from the spice trade. This image shows the land captured by Spain and Portugal. Red color is for the Spain and blue color is for the Portuguese. With the preparations that were mentioned earlier was not only related to preparations done by Vasco da Gama but all the other efforts made before him. In order to find the route to India, John too not only started sea exploration but also sent expeditions overland. Notably, Pero de Covilla and Afonso Paiva, disguised as traders, were sent out as spies overland en route to India, and they were supposed to send regular reports to the Portuguese king. Similarly, several expeditions were sent out over sea before Vasco da Gama, notable of them Diego, Bartholomew, and later Vasco da Gama. We will see them one by one. Pero and Afonso left Portugal via land route to India in 1497, almost 10 years before Vasco da Gama maiden voyage. They traveled together from Portugal, then to Barcelona, then to Naples, from there to Alexandria, to Cairo, and then to Aden. From there they separated, and then Pero went to India and Afonso went to Abyssinia or the modern day Ethiopia in search of Prester John. Trials from sea, we can see prominent of them were Diego, Bartholomew, Vasco, and later on Pedro. These missions laid the foundation and helped subsequent voyages to push further. 15 years before Vasco da Gama, Diego was sent on a mission to map the Africa coast. In 2 voyages, he reached the mouth of Congo River on the West Africa coast and Cape Cross, that is the modern day Namibia, in second trip, which lasted between 1484 to 1486. Left photo has markings for Congo River. This was the first mission and he had to return from here. In the second trip, he went little further south till Cape Cross. Another photo shows a draw or pillar with the name of Portugal king embedded on it. It was erected to denote the claim of Portugal over this land as they were the first to see it and no subsequent Christian king would lay their claim over it. 2 years later, Bartholomew Diaz reached up to the southernmost tip of Africa. He had to face several storms and on his returning, he named it Cape Storm. At the same time, he showed the Portuguese that Africa can be rounded and if they go east, they would reach India. John II, the king of Portugal at that time, renamed the Cape Storm to Cape of Good Hope, citing it as a good hope to route to India. This also reduced the unwarranted fears of the place in the mind of the sailors. This route to India was also called the Cape Route and was the only known route via sea for the next 370 years, until the Suez Canal opened and turned out to be a shortcut between Europe and Asia. You must be wondering why lots of places are referred Cape. Well, Cape are the places where land comes out a bit into the sea from the mainland, and Cape, which supposedly has its root in cap or top or head. That is why those protruding or those lands coming out into the sea were termed as Cape. Pedro came to India on a mission after Vasco da Gama. Gama reached in 1498 Pedro in 1500, 2 years after Gama's maiden voyage. The reason I included him is the fascinating story behind him. When Vasco returned to Portugal from India, he must have described the riches and possibilities in terms of trade and other things which lies for the country. Out of the Vasco expedition, a new mission was hurriedly set up. Number of ships went up to 13 from 4, and number of men went up to 1200 from just 170, which was with Vasco da Gama. The mission also had famed explorer Bartholomew. Maybe he wanted to see India with his own eyes, but unfortunately he died much before that. So while on the mission, Pedro's ships drifted far away from the African coast and landed on a new place. He knew this was not India and placed the Pedro pillar there first. It was a new land and within the limits of Portugal. As per the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, a ship was immediately sent to Portugal to give the news to the king. This country was Brazil. It was colonized, and that is the reason Brazil is the largest Portuguese speaking country today, much more than Portugal itself, while other South American nations are Spanish speaking because they were colonized by Spain and only Brazil was colonized by Portuguese. Pedro ships continued their mission to India only after losing 4 more ships near southern tip of Africa in a storm. Bartholomew ship drowned there too. Let's begin with the history of Vasco da Gama himself. So, before leaving for the voyage, on the morning of 8 July 1497, Vasco da Gama and his companion were escorted by a procession of priests and friars. They had the blessing of the church and the favor of the King Manuel I. Their sins were absolved in virtue of the bull of Pope Nicholas V, since they were obeying the papal bull. That was the reason their sins were absolved. As with the earlier missions, they were handed over several pedros, stone pillars, to set up as mark of discovery. Vasco erected this pedrao in at Mossel Bay, Rio de Cobre in Mozambique, Rio dos Bos Sinais, Malindi, and Calicut. Let's have a look about the operational facts. They had 3 ships, each one of them 100 to 200 ton, but that's grossly debated whether it was more than 200 ton or it was 100 and 150 tons. But anyway, let's take it 100 to 200 tons. That is where most of the sources agree. And the other ship was for provision, so the total number of ships were 4 with Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama was on Sao Gabriel. His brother Paulo da Gama was commanding Sao Rafael. Bartholomew played a very important role in constructing both of these ships. So the mission had total 170 persons. So each of these ships were supposed to have one captain, one master, pilot, assistant pilot, mate, boatswain, able or experienced seamen 20 each of the ship, ordinary seamen 10, boys 2, gunner 1, bombardier for the cannons 8, 4 trumpeters, 1 clerk, storekeeper 1, officer of justice or judge 1, 1 barber surgeon in each of the ship, 2 interpreters, 1 chaplain, priest, artificer, and 10 servants, probably 1 plus more Negro slaves. Almost the same composition was there on other ships as well. Vasco lost 150 men in this mission and only 55 returned to Lisbon. A glance at the maps and instruments carried by him. Vasco da Gama had maps of Ptolemy and reports maps also from Pero de Covilla, who was sent out as spy to East Indies. Pero de Covilla sent reports and maps which he fetched from Arab traders, Indian sources back to the Portuguese, which were handed over to Vasco da Gama. He had basic astrolabe to find out the latitude and longitude. Zacut, the astronomer, provided him with the astrolabe. Zacut was a Jew and had to flee from Portugal too. His history is quite interesting, and his prediction of solar eclipse saved Columbus to be killed by the Native Americans. Some instruments with him was a compass, sounding leads, hourglass, catena epope, which was used to determine the ship leeway, toleta de marteloia, I don't know, some Portuguese instrument, equinoctial compass, variation compass, but most of these are debated for their accuracy and questionable to cross the sea from Africa to India. Listening to C.K. Raju, a very notable Indian mathematician, I came to know that his Vasco's guide Kanak used an instrument Kamal, which was quite simple, fascinating, and still accurate enough to determine positions in the range of 11 miles to 1500 miles. Left one is Kamal, used by the Indian guide to Vasco, and the right one is Vasco's astrolabe. Let's move on the interesting part of the Vasco da Gama mission to India, Malindi to Calicut. Malindi is on the eastern coast of Africa. Gama befriended the king there and enjoyed his hospitality. King helped in repairing their ships, also provided lots of provisions and two guides for each of the ship on their way to India. Just two ships were left, other were destroyed or sunk. Kanak was the pilot who guided Vasco da Gama from Malindi to Calicut. He was said to be a native of Gujarat. Other guide was Dawane, both residents of India. Dawane also acted as a broker for them in trading in Calicut, as he knew the rates and quality of the spices and other stuffs. It took them 23 days to reach to Calicut from Malindi. This map has markings for the location with the year they were reached or discovered by the Portuguese. Notable of them starting from the Portugal are Canary Islands, then little south Cape Verde, more south Cape Cross, then Cape of Good Hope, then Mombasa, going up Melindi and Kozhikode or Calicut. Vasco didn't landed directly on Calicut. Their ship saw Cananore, a fishing place little north of Calicut first. Kanak told the crew to have patience as Calicut is little down south, not much far. On reaching Calicut, his ship was anchored little away from the shores. Vasco sent convicted criminals to swim and sense the mood of the place first. In Manipulai words, the author of The Ivory Throne, it were the convicted criminals from the gutter of Portugal who set their foot first on the land of India. That's how he put it. Some days later, King Manivikrama, also called the Zamorin or Samudrin of Calicut, offered a courtesy audience to Vasco da Gama. Courtiers and king were surprised to see the presence from the so-called ambassador, the great king of Portugal. Gifts were caps, strings of corals, wash hand basins, honey and sugar. These were all kind of a laughing stock to present to the king from someone from a royal personality as claimed by Vasco. The visit didn't went well. It was very customary for every merchant at that time to present gifts and oblige to taxes before they starts trading. Infuriated, Vasco returned to ship. A couple of days later, some event happened and he was jailed for a couple of days. So he returned to the ship and decided to return. By the time they had traded enough to load spices and other stuffs into their ship, and staying here was certainly a risk. It is also said that he had kidnapped some 10 to 11 native priests and took them back to Portugal. Now, Vasco da Gama returned to India in less than 2 years, and this time in 1502, he returned with 20 ships. On the way, he forced the Kilwa, a native leader, to swear to the Portugal king. Vasco da Gama also burned ablaze 400 men, women, children aboard a ship called Mary, and it had 200 Muslim pilgrims from Makkah. He fueled the fires for 4 days until all surely died. This was just to show the cruelty and to let the other merchants know about the presence of Vasco da Gama. He also sacked 24 ships and set them and 800 crew on fire. Those were merchant ships. Vasco da Gama also captured an envoy, tortured and returned to Calicut with dog's ears sewn on his head with a note, "Have a curry made of human flesh." He also bombarded the Calicut from his ships. Vasco da Gama also captured some 30 fishermen. He chopped their body into pieces and floated them near the coast so that their family collects and then this word spreads out. So, reason to put the previous and this slide here is Vasco da Gama is presented to Indians as a sailor or a great explorer. Top left is from class 7 NCERT textbook. Top right is museum website managed by Government of India. Bottom right is places of details again maintained by Government of India. I mean, let's call him a sailor, but why hide his brutalities? Killing 800 men, chopping 30 fishermen into pieces and floating them around is certainly not a work of adventurous explorer. Indian maritime history is filled with glorious chapters. Their ships were much larger, as Raja Bhoj of 10th century details them in his books. The Cholas, Pallavas were unmatched maritime powers in the Southeast Asia. Do we know any explorer from them? Of course not. I am pointing a couple of things here, and I would let you think more on these topics. That's all. Thank you.